This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.
Welcome. This is episode 492 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I am not Jamie Bogner, as you can tell. This is executive editor Joe Stange. Jamie has unleashed me from the magazine's editorial desk to host this one because I am our resident homebrewer, as far as that goes. During this special episode, produced in partnership with Pinter, we're going to talk about the very heart and soul of craft brewing. And by that, I mean the magic of making beer at home, and how the ability to experience that little spark of joy can get people really excited about craft beer. The vast majority of brewers we talk to on this podcast and for the magazine start out as homebrewers. And I can't tell you how many of them say it all started way back when somebody gifted them a Mr. Beer kit or something like it. Making it easier for people to make and enjoy beer at home is an important part of the craft beer story. That's really where the story begins. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how the Pinter works and about the growing number of beers and styles you can make with it. And we're going to talk about Pinter's expanding partnerships with craft breweries in the United States and in Britain. There are beers you can brew from Lagunitas, from Great Lakes, from Chicago's Hopewell, from Adnams in England, and more. You can even brew an Iron Maiden beer. Joining me for the podcast are Paul Benner, U.S. CEO of Pinter and an experienced brewery operator. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Joe. Super excited to chat with you today, man.
I'm excited too. And Will Kirkham, Pinter's head brewer based in London, and just last year named the highly commended head brewer of the year at the World Beer Awards Icons of Beer. Congratulations and welcome to the podcast, Will.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Joe, it's gone to Will's head so much too in the last year.
God,
it's ridiculous.
I mean, I think he deserves it.
Walk around the office, man. He's like a rooster walking around the office.
Yeah, it's a bit of a running joke. Every time we're out, I bring it up. I'm trying to be more satirical.
No big deal.
Just serious.
just World Head Brewer of the Year, no big deal. I want to thank you guys for sending me the Pinter unit, so I could test it out and come from a place of knowing with it. I don't think that surprise is the right word at all. I'd be relieved. I'm relieved that the beer turned out great. I was afraid I would screw something up and then have to, blame it on user error or whatever. But it was really cool. I had a few friends over yesterday and we tapped it yesterday. It was ready just in time. And the first proper pint of it was crystal clear, great foam on it, tasted great. And it kind of did bring back that little bit, that little spark of the first time you brew in it and it turns out great and you get excited again. I am a home brewer. I'm a lazy home brewer. One of the reasons I get into it is to control everything right. I started all grain so I could mess around with mash steps and things like that. So which means I also usually screw something up. And this was so easy and it turned out great beer. We really enjoyed it and had a great time. And so it was sort of that was a nice reminder of what it's all about. So thanks for sending that over. I'm going to keep trying it and I'm going to do more kits. This was the Lagunitas Something Easy. Bright, clear, crisp, dry, tastes great. It's got great foam. We can talk more about that stuff later, but we should definitely talk more about Pinter. I would love to hear how you guys got into this. Maybe you each want to tell me a little bit about your own brewing backgrounds and how you got into this.
Yeah, I'll start, Joe. And first off, I'm very excited that you had a good experience with it, and I'm happy to talk through your experience, and I think it will help maybe guide the audience on why Pinter has been such a quick success since it started only about 5 years ago. But I'll start with my background a little bit. So Paul Benner, like you mentioned, I'm the U.S. CEO of Pinter. I was actually the first United States employee hired in the company. We are a UK founded company, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of the business in a bit. But I've been in this position for a little over 2 years now since we launched in the States. My background is really full circle here, being back in the homebrewing world. So my first business in beer was a little homebrew shop in my local community in Cleveland, Ohio. I launched that in 2012, called the Cleveland Brew Shop, full service homebrew supply deal. We, sold everything from, small starter kits to different grains and hops, and also did classes on site. And, when I launched that, I thought this is it. This is the one for me. I'm going to be in this hobby that I loved so much. And this is going to be my business. And how things are, a couple years later, I had an opportunity to launch a brewery in Cleveland, and I did that in 2014. So that brewery was Platform Beer Company. Platform was a small tap room, a small 3.5 barrel system. That was our first. I literally could poke my head over the kettle and see what was going on in our first brew house. And from there in 14, we grew at a pretty ridiculous rate where we had 2 tap rooms in Cleveland, one in Columbus, one in Cincinnati. We had a large production facility with a 60 barrel brew house, 240 barrel tanks. And in a span of 5 years, we grew from that small tap room to actually being acquired by Anheuser-Busch in 2019, really right before COVID, which was pretty ridiculous timing in some respects, and stayed on board for a number of years until AB decided to shutter that brand that I built. And at that point was looking for something different to do that was still felt like a startup. I could kind of scratch that entrepreneurial itch. But I didn't want to start another brewery. That's why I was approached by the Pinter guys at that point. And so now I am, I've gone from, selling homebrew supplies and being an avid, rabid homebrewer myself, I would say, in my 20s, to making batches that were in tanks that were literally outside of our facility because they were so tall, and then back now to making 1.5 gallons at a time. It's a pretty fun, 15 years for me.
That's great. Will, why don't you tell us how you got to be into brewing and became head brewer at Pinter?
Yeah, so I suppose my my kind of route into brewing is pretty unconventional, I'd say. So I basically started many years ago running a small kind of health foods production company. So I was managing general kind of operations, production, dispatch, product development, things of that nature. And I always enjoyed, more than anything, creating new products, bringing them to market, and then seeing how they perform on the market. And it's just that kind of great satisfaction of people enjoying what you've put a lot of hard work into producing for them. And then fast forward, I joined Pinter. I originally joined as a supervisor for our production facility. So we were blending our fresh presses in house, and I was supervising that. And then obviously I was always into beer, really in quite a big way. Obviously didn't really know what I was doing. Always wanted to homebrew, but never had that kind of that initial kick up the arse to get it going, because you want to do it right, and it's a lot of equipment to buy, a lot of space, a lot of time. So it kind of it took a while for me to get going in that regard. But then whilst I was working for Pinter, kind of started slowly becoming even more interested in beer, and then gradually moved over into the brewing development team. Learned how to brew beer, all the fundamentals, did some brewing exams, and I suppose kind of worked my way up the ranks. And now I've been head brewer for about 2 years now. And in that time, we've worked with some amazing brands. Of course, we started off in the UK, working with Guinness, Brewdog, company breweries of those likes, and then launching in America. It's really, really skyrocketed. I'm proud to say, we've won quite a few awards over the last few years, Europe and also USA beer ratings. And then, of course, Paul is going to be tired of me saying this, but yeah, just thought I'd mention that I got the Honey accredited head brewers award last year as well. So yeah, that's my journey.
You mentioned those fresh presses, and for people who don't know, those are the packets of extracts essentially that come when you order a beer. And I totally want to get into that later. But I'm really interested in like the Pinter origin story. Somebody out there had the idea for it, and there's some inspiration, and then I'm super interested in kind of the development process for it, like the design, and then tweaking it, that sort of R&D process to get this thing, because it's really elegant. I mean, it's inexpensive, it's simple, it's, I'd say, deceptively simple. There's some parts of it that are smart, that aren't obvious if you just hear about how how to use it. So I would love to kind of hear about that process of how it was developed, if you guys don't mind getting into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, maybe we can kind of tag team this a little bit.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give maybe a little bit of foundation on the two founders of the company and how they got it to where it is today. So Ralph and Alex are they were college roommates. They went to school together. They're both Brits. I believe they went to Manchester University together, and they're both engineers. So one is civil engineer, the other is aerospace, and they very much have built this business and the product itself with an engineering hat on. I think that's very clear if you start messing around with the Pinter. So they are both entrepreneurs. They started a business right out of college that was a festival business. So they ran a number of music festivals and actually became very successful. At their peak, they had, 5 or 6 festivals that they would run every year in England. They throw out names like The Hives. With their last big show, they had Snoop Dogg was the headliner, which is a whole hilarious story. Maybe off camera one day, talk about how Snoop Dogg went. But they had a really successful business that they ended up selling because Ralph always had this vision that he wanted to build some type of global business, and they weren't going to do that with the festival business. So they sold that, and they pivoted to this idea of this, we'll just call it like brew in a box or ready to brew products. Their initial product was a cider in a box, which was like this, and they would say it is just this really crude, probably terrible tasting cider that is in a plastic bag within a box. There's actually this really cringeworthy episode of the British version of Shark Tank that they were on, where the two of them are in these like ill-fitting suits talking about this cider product.
Can we find that on YouTube?
I'm sure you can. It's just
Dragon's Den.
Hilarious. Dragon's Den. That's Dragon's Den. Yeah. So that was their first iteration of, and they did that actually before they even went big with the festival business, but then they tabled it just because it wasn't like a ready to go. But once they exited that business, then they did pivot full time into Pinter and made some serious investments in building out a true product. So they, through the engineering process, came up with Pinter 1, which released in 2020, which is kind of this COVID darling business product, especially. So you think about a homebrewing product that launched in the summer of 2020. You can imagine it was just this monster hit right out of the gate, and it was. They were selling $1 million a month of this Pinter right out of the gate. I would say over the last few years, there's been iterations to that first version that's gotten us to where we are now, which is our Pinter 3. This is the third version, which is truly like a ready for market product, and we've had that for a little over 2 years. Will, why don't you go ahead and talk about any other maybe design elements or engineering or things that make the unit itself unique that you've iterated over the years? I think that's a good point for you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, our design engineers are super good at what they do, and I've been at Pinter since we had the first iteration of the Pinter. So I've really kind of, figured out, well, I'm just used to seeing the kind of stages of improvement, iteration to iteration. And I remember the first iteration of the Pinter, the tap was it was kind of fixed. You couldn't remove the tap like you can now in the P3. And to tap the beer, you had to open the carbonation dial on the back of the Pinter. So it just didn't really make much sense. But now we have an active pour tap, which basically kind of controls the rate of flow depending on the user and also the rate of carbonation that's left. Inside the Pinter, whether it be at the start of the tapping process or towards the end when you maybe you've got a couple of pints left. That's probably one of the most to me most useful things that we've kind of changed with the Pinter, and also the hopper as well. We're able to essentially dry hop a beer post fermentation, which is a real game changer as well.
You mentioned the carbonation valve, and that's the dial, or however you guys term it. But that is one of the pieces I want to talk about, because I think that is really clever. But maybe first we should maybe walk people through the process of how to do it, so they know a little bit more clearly what we're talking about. I'll just sort of run through the process as I experienced it really quick. I'll try to do it really quickly anyway. But I loved how easy and quick it was. Obviously, that's the point also. But I'm used to killing a whole day of dragging out equipment and pre-cleaning and grinding malt and all these things, and then just absolutely exhausted by the end of the day. So what happens in the end? I don't brew that much. This though was like my first time, and it still took 15 minutes to get it going, and that's including reading the instructions. And so essentially rinsing things out. There's an easy sanitizer to add in, and then you're ready to fill it up with water. Add in the fresh press, which is that pouch that includes malt extract, hop extract. There's some yeast nutrient in there, it looks like. Sometimes maybe an acid, which probably helps keep it crisp. There's an acid adjustment, I guess, in there somehow. But basically, you don't have to think about any of that. You put it in there, make sure it gets mixed up really well, give it a good shake. You attach it at some point to that brewing dock, which I didn't quite understand at first, but when it's time to go from fermentation after a week or so and get it into conditioning in the refrigerator, and this goes into your fridge, it fits in the fridge, or it should, depending on your fridge, what you got in there. It all made sense because I saw how everything settled into the brewing dock, and essentially just removing all the sediment, the trub in that dock, and it's gone, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And the brilliance of that becomes clear when you first tap the thing, 5-6 days later, less maybe. And maybe there's a little haze in the first half a glass maybe. And then it was like, wow, it was totally clear. And then great foam on it. So then that's getting my wheels turning on that carbonation dial as well. That it's, I guess, a rudimentary spunding valve. I'm not sure how you would describe it, but
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. So we brew up to 2.2 bar of pressure. I'm not sure if you guys use PSI or bar.
Bar, and that's very rare. Like two bar would in a commercial brewery just is kind of unheard of. So it's a unique process there.
Yeah. So it kind of leads into a whole host of other things, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. But yeah, brewing under about 2.2 bar of pressure, everything excess just vents out. On the carbonation dial itself, I'm sure you've seen there's a few numbers. So all the way to the left is off, which is essentially open. So that's how we can kind of clean the valve itself by tipping it upside down when the purifier is in to rinse some through. And then each number going up to 5 being fully closed, which holds up to 2.2 bar of pressure. It kind of incrementally increases the amount of pressure that's held within the Pinter. So depending on the style, this can kind of be adjusted.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yesterday we had poured a few pints of it, and then that immediate sort of pressure that was in there that made it, of course, foamy, but also made it easy to pour, slowed, and then I had to, then I continued to read the instructions, which I should have done in the first place, but to turn the carbonation valve to off so that it lets some air in, and then I remembered to close it last night at the end. So when I poured another one today, the next day, the pressure that had re-established itself, and it poured really nicely again. And I was like, this is really cool, because I thought maybe you let some air in and then it's going to kind of go a little flat. Maybe it's a one night thing. No, it's good for a while because of that thing.
Yeah, I would say, sorry, I was just going to throw into something there, Will, on the idea of fermenting under pressure. There's two benefits to that. One is it does ferment a little quicker, because when we use a specific yeast that works well in those environments, because not all yeast work well in a high pressure environment. We identify that for the brewers. The other is it's capturing that excess CO2, which can then later be used when you put it in a cold environment to naturally carbonate the beer. So we don't have any artificial forced carbonation at all in this process. And how that's different than, obviously traditional homebrewers is you're transferring from primary to secondary potentially, then to package. And every one of those steps is introducing variables, right? And those two big variables are, the chance of infection and oxygen pickup. And because this is done completely closed in one device, and even that separation, like you had mentioned, from where it brews on a dock, and that's that collection vessel for the solids and spent leads, that is under pressure when you take it off. So again, there's no oxygen pickup at that time. The same is true when you tap your first beer. So we like to say, and I think you can argue this, it's about as fresh a beer as you possibly can drink, meaning that it has been exposed to literally no oxygen at any point in the step, because we don't ever move it from that closed vessel. So it's an important, I think, distinction. And when we get to why this has been a popular device and why are people continuing to brew on it, because of some of these engineering things that we've created that just make a better product at the end of the day.
It does. Essentially it tastes incredibly professional, which is not necessarily going to happen if you don't have super airtight processes at home. And I'm typically shaking the heck out of my kegs and everything to force carbonate with, just a lot of really crude things that where with this device, essentially you're making a really polished real ale. I mean, there's nothing really, it's all natural, and that freshness aspect, which I know is a huge part of how you promote it, but it's true. It's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. It is hard to get any fresher than it's spent, a week on your countertop and then 5 days in your fridge, and you're tapping it, and oxygen has barely touched it, if at all. So it's impressive design all around.
Yeah, for sure.
We talked a little bit about some of the breweries whose beers you guys can. I brewed the Lagunitas, something easy. That was fun. One of the ones I want to do is that Great Lakes Burning River Pale Ale, because that's a beer I could get as a young man in Missouri, and I really enjoyed that beer. I didn't even realize they had stopped making it at some point, or at least it's not a regular one anymore. So I think it's the idea that I could recreate that at home is really cool to me. Can you talk about how do you guys sort of work with the breweries, and then if a brewery wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, we would love to do this beer with you guys, how does all that work?
Yep. And I'll talk about how we have expanded the partnership program, and then Will can talk about how he works directly with the brands to develop products. Okay, so the distinction between maybe traditional homebrewing and a Pinter brewer is, a lot of times people get into homebrewing because they want to experiment, right? So they want to try different things. They want to, do a new style. They want to do a different brew every time. They want to, they just want to be very creative in that respect. A Pinter brewer has a little different motivation, right? So a Pinter brewer is, or at least our goal, is to provide the exact same product over and over and over again. So if you brewed that Lagunitas, something easy, the first time you brewed it, which was, a couple weeks ago, it should taste the exact same time the 100th time that you brew it. That's the commitment from us, is to make sure that is the case. Now with that comes, lack of maybe creativity, so if you can't, there's maybe some small things you could do on the Pinter, but that's not our goal, is to be that kind of brand. So what we try to do is provide a wide breadth of options for customers to try out, right? So we have somewhere around 25 different individual beers, seltzers, ciders, even some other beyond beer stuff that we're working on that people can choose from. But what we found is that our customers, what they really love is to interact with other brands on the Pinter. So Will had mentioned, like, Guinness was our biggest launch in 24, and that was a huge brand opportunity for us, right? So it does two things. It gives our customers kind of this new way of experiencing a brand that maybe they're familiar with. And it also gives us, we think, credibility in the market, because we have a brand like Guinness who said, yeah, I've gone through the entire iteration process. I've worked with the Pinter brewers. We've tasted the beers, and we're signing off on this as, like, we are stamping this as a quality product that we're happy to have people interact with. And we see that over and over again as we work with brands. Now, like I said, we were a UK-based company. Those British and European brands were the first ones that we partnered with. Now in 25 and really in 26 is when we've begun partnering with some really amazing US breweries, and we've got some crazy names coming on the platform in the next 12 months. And how it works is, it's different for every brand, but most of the brands are like, we want to have a way to interact with customers in a different way. It's all about, like, in a home, how can Lagunitas interact with Joe from Missouri in a new way, right? Rather than Joe going to the grocery store and buying a 6-pack. Well, this is a new way of doing that, right? And what we found is there's 3 ways of doing it. We can either replicate an existing beer that's in the market. We've done that. We can try and replicate a beer that is a retired brand in their lineup, but used to be a fan favorite. We've done that. Or we can just start from scratch with a brand new product that is co-branded and come to market with that. We've done that too. So it's really what the brand wants to do. You had mentioned Great Lakes. This is a perfect example where Burning River was their flagship pale ale for years, probably decades. And, their business has changed. So it's no longer a priority. And about a year and a half ago or so, they actually stopped producing it in package. So with the Great Lakes team, they're like, look, we get emails from all over the country, and the first 2 questions are, when are you going to sell in my state, and where the hell is Burning River? So, like, now if somebody from Oregon wants to interact with Great Lakes, they can't buy their products at a store, but they can, they can brew Burning River on Pinter. And we think that's just better for beer in general. It's better for customers. It's a great experience. And then in exchange, this is kind of like our way of giving back to the craft beer community, is like, we give royalty to these brands that come on board for each unit sold. So it truly is like, for us, we get credibility. We get to work with these awesome brands. We give our customers new products to keep them excited to stay brewing on the platform. And for the brands, I mean, we're one of the few people who are coming to them saying, hey, we want to give you money in exchange for the brand equity that you've built over the last 25 plus years. So it's all bottom line to them. There's very little uplift for the brands. And that is, I guess word has gotten out because we get a lot of intake from some pretty incredible large, regional and national craft brands that will be coming on the platform in the next 12 months. So, and then, whatever you want to know about that, Joe, is cool. And then Will can talk about how we nail the beers with them.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask about next. First of all, I'm looking forward to seeing what breweries come on in the next months. That's exciting. But I'm super curious. Yeah, when you start to work with a brewery, I assume they come to you with essentially a recipe. These are okay for Burning River or whatever. These are grist percentages. These are our usual hop additions, and then you've got to somehow take all of this, these details that are finely tuned over years, and turn it into this like pouch of sticky magical goo. It's a really cool, but I'm super fascinated by that formulation process. Like, is it something where you have to take several stabs at it, Will, to nail it? Or have you got it at this point sort of down to where the elements that need to go in there, the components to make that work?
Oh gosh, it is generally getting harder and harder. So obviously now we're working with bigger and bigger brands. The expectation on us delivering is increasing as well, which is great. That's what we want. We want to constantly innovate, constantly be increasing the kind of performance of the pinter, whether that be the machine itself, or the beers that we produce, or our suppliers that we work with, all things of that nature. And especially in the kind of homebrewing world, there's constant innovation in terms of hop extracts, malt extracts, loads of different things are just constantly popping up on the market. So, whilst we're also, developing beers, probably 80% of our workload is probably going towards that. The other 20% is always making sure we are trying to up and elevate our kind of game. And so essentially, once we've kind of decided on a beer to do with a brewery, they would send us over, say for example, it is one of their existing products. They'd send us over the recipe. We'd have another call just to kind of talk about the kind of organoleptic sensory of the beer as well. Obviously, I'm in the UK, so a lot of American breweries that we work with, we don't have over here. So I'd have zero base knowledge on the beer. So it's super important for me to have that call with the brewing team to basically describe how they perceive the beer. Then we'd walk through the recipe, potential limitations from the pinter, how we'd fix them with different solutions, where we'd add some of this hop pre-fermentation to get some more biotransformation to target this kind of aromatic. And then we'd do a few iterations. Once we're happy, we'd send them over to the brewery. They'd brew up a good few options, select the best one. We'd have another call to kind of go over all of the feedback, and essentially we'll just iterate until we're at a point where we're just really happy with it.
That's really cool. What is the brewery like at where you are? I mean, is there a small test brewery or what's it? I'm just kind of curious of what that place is.
Yeah, so in our head office in King's Cross, so it's our office, also our workshop space. So it's where we do all of the beer development there. We also do all of the pinter machine development there as well. We've constantly got, I don't know, probably close to about 100 pinters, either brewing, conditioning, or laying around. Fridges full of ingredients,
So how many people are on the team? Because I'm imagining there's a lot of sensory work that has to happen. And at some point, everybody is tired of trying your beers and giving you a little bit of feedback. After a while, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not enough people, Will, right?
Yeah. That's
he wants a bigger team.
Yeah, I'm always happy when Paul and some other members of our US team come over, because they're trained beer tasters and we need more of them.
I imagine that would be a lot. Yeah. I'm curious about the yeast. I was looking around on the shop at the different strains, and you've given them different names. Spark is the one for most of the ales. Although there's a couple of Belgian styles that have one called Rise, I noticed. And then for the ciders, I guess it's Vigor. I'm not sure if there's other strains or what. And maybe you can't tell us about those yeasts. I don't know if that. I assume that's proprietary to a degree. But I'm just. It's clear they're clearly reliable little monsters. Anything you can tell us about them, I'd be really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely talk about our lager and ale strain. The others, probably not so much. I could probably loosely talk about them, but yeah, our lager and ale strain is Lallemand Nova Lager.
Oh.
And for us, it's an absolute power horse. Since we've been using it, it's been incredible. And obviously, us brewing under such high pressure, around 2.2 bar, it's most yeasts they can't survive. And of course, we need a yeast strain that can brew consistently at room temperature, which we would say is 20 degrees Celsius. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. I always forget. Paul, what is it?
68.
60. Yeah. So yeah, Nova's has been really great for us. It has a modified MET10 gene, which basically makes it so it just doesn't produce any sulfur, any H2S, it's just incredible for us. Obviously, fermenting anything at 2.2 bar, 20 degrees, especially lagers, it's going to be pretty stinky. So, and yeah, it's also got a high Valin uptake, so it produces lower diacetyl as well. And because it's a hybrid, certain parts, I think it's probably about 3/4 ale. So all of the kind of robust features that we need come from that, and the kind of clean characteristics from the Pastoriana side come through as well. So for us, it's an absolute power horse.
I think this is a strong endorsement of Lallemand's Nova Lager yeast. And I mean, having just used it for this, I was and not knowing what it was. I mean, I thought maybe it was Lutra or something, some clean balancer attenuator, but it attenuated really well. I mean, it's dry. This is crisp. This beer is finished. So that's actually really super interesting that you're using that. I think that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Also,
yeah, no worries. I suppose I'll just briefly touch on our other yeast strains. So our kind of wheat beer and Belgian beers is just like a POF positive yeast that works really well for us, really highly attenuating, and yeah, it just works really well in our format. And our cider yeast as well, it has that same MET10 modified gene, so low sulfur production. We also use that same strain for our seltzers, plus some kind of yeast nutrient as well, because obviously seltzers is predominantly just a sugar base and needs a bit more of a kind of nutritional boost.
That's excellent. Yeah. Now I'm really glad I asked about yeast. Obviously, that is also an important part of the design. I mean, for the things to work really well every time, that yeast is a critical component. I would love to hear a little bit more about Pinter and where it's going to go from here. I mean, you guys have obviously grown a lot in the past few years. The timing is obviously great, starting during the pandemic, about as good as the timing as selling Platform right before the pandemic. It seems like you guys are in a good spot, and the product selling itself. I mean, I've got friends now in the neighborhood who want one, so it obviously works that way. But what are the ambitions for Pinter, and then what's next for you guys?
Yeah, I'll kind of go. I want to start in a foundation of like the homebrew world. So if you would have been pitched that like, hey, there's this new homebrew product that's like doing so well because homebrewing is absolutely killing in the United States, you'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
The homebrew world, and I know it from firsthand experience, having opened a shop, and I would probably say the peak of the homebrew rage was probably 2010 to 2014, give or take. Just kind of front running the craft beer peak, I would say, probably the homebrew space. And since then, it's just been a hobby that's been dying. I mean, there's kind of no other way to say it, and it's really disappointing for somebody who's been in this space for 15 years and honestly seen some of, like you had mentioned before, some of the best brewers that go on to work at production facilities or start their own shops, they started homebrewers. Like that's the bench that built the bench consistently. I mean, so many of actually a ton of our brewers that worked at Platform, they did stints over at the shop first. So they would work at the shop, they'd be, talking to homebrewers, and then they would be the first people that we'd hire for a cellarman position or assistant brewer or something like that. So that's kind of as a back, like I guess a framing of like how we're able to do this in this kind of declining environment. But here's why I think Pinter has taken off and why I think people aren't homebrewing anymore. I think there's kind of 4 things that I've identified. First is like and you'll appreciate all of these, I'm sure, Joe, right? So it's an expensive hobby to get into. Really, that same starter kit that I sold in 2012 is the exact same thing that you would buy today. It's buckets, it's glasses, it's tubing, it's cappers. That initial thing it's going to cost you $200 easy.
Yeah, that's just right? The beginning. Then it goes on from there.
That's like for this ugliest setup. That's table stakes, right? And then the size of these things is also a consideration. So, like I said, you have these buckets, carboys. There's a lot of these sitting in people's basements that were given to them on Father's Day or for Christmas. That literally just take up space. And if it's a hobby that you want to invest in, like you're talking kettles, you're talking, keezers. I mean, who knows, right? It could go. It's an unlimited amount of stuff that you could get in the homebrew community, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The next is just the time commitment, like you had mentioned earlier. Usually an all grain batch is going to be 4-hour session, 5-hour session, give or take, depending on how much you drink during it. Yeah.
It's longer for me, but yeah, maybe for normal people, it'd be 4 or 5 hours. Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. Right. So, and then, of course, you're then caring for the beer at different steps over the next 3 weeks or so. And then finally, the beer, if we're honest, especially as a new homebrewer, usually tastes like shit. It's a hobby like any that you need to put in time and effort and investment and quality equipment upgrades and expertise to get better product. So all those 4 factors are working against this hobby, right? And so here's then this device that comes in the U.S. market in 24. We give it away for free. So 95+% of our sales are on our subscription model. So the machine is free if you sign up for a 6-month subscription. So all you're paying is just the normal retail cost of the beer that we sell. Okay, so it's free. So the barrier of expensive hobby is gone. The next is just the size and the amount of equipment. You've seen it. I mean, it kind of basically replaces like a 12-pack in your fridge, the size of that. And it's only just those 2 small components. It makes about 1.5 gallons of beer, which is equivalent to about 12 pints, which compared to 50 bottles of 12-ounce beers at a homebrew, which you end up giving away half of them, it's an appropriate amount of beer for you to brew at home. Okay, and it's small. It's in a small footprint. The third is like the time commitment to it. Like you said, 15, 20 minutes to batch. And, for purists, they may be like, might scoff at that, but it's because it's been engineered in a way to not take 5 hours to brew. Okay, so we've taken basically all of the hot side away from the brewing process, and you're focusing just on the fermentation side. And then the beer, because it ferments under pressure, like I mentioned, like a lot of our ales, the recommended fermentation time is 5 days. Lagers, 7. You can do it a little longer, but those are our minimums. And saying 10 to 14 days is like the shortest time that you could do an ale or a lager and have it ready to tap. And in that whole process, there's no caring for it really. The conditioning phase is literally just pop it off of your brew dock and put it in the fridge. Cleanup is a piece of cake. You'll see that when you empty your pinter. All the components separate very cleanly so that you can get in there and clean everything simply. And then finally, like I said, the first time you brew your Lagunitas, it should taste the same as your 100th. So it's, if you can follow instructions pretty simply, and we have, video instructions, we have, visual instructions, and then we have, written instructions that people can follow. And once they do it once, it's like you won't mess it up probably the second time. So the beer, the first time you brew on a pinter should taste great. It should taste like a beer that you would expect to pour from, you know, any local craft brewery when you tap a can. So that's who we are, and that's the problem that we've solved. That's why we've, in my opinion, hit a nerve in this market, because there are a lot of people who would love to make beer at home, but they don't want to deal with all that shit, right? So, and it's an interesting thing. We did a survey, this is just to that point, of our customers recently, and we found that less than 10% of our customers have ever homebrewed in the past. So this is just bringing more people back into the craft beer space, quite frankly, and making them interested in tinkering with making beer at home, which you never know what that could lead to. I mean, the first time I made beer, I was completely hooked. I knew this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that might happen to thousands of people again in the United States because of this experience. So I think that's who we are. That's the need we fill. And that's, I think, why we've been successful.
I think there could be, I think this has a place in my house, and I'm a relatively experienced homebrewer. When I'm homebrewing, I might be chasing flavors and things that, that's part of the fun for me. I love working with recipes. Mm-hmm. And this takes all of that out of my hands, which is, I guess that's the trade-off. But on the other hand, the thing that I made with Pinter and tapped last night is more professional than 95% of what I end up making and drinking out of the keg, So yep. There is, and it was so easy to do. It's like, why wouldn't you do it if you've got room in the refrigerator? And anyway, I'm going to keep playing with it for sure.
That's great.
But the homebrewing thing it really strikes a chord, I'm sure, with a lot of us, because I still view homebrewing as really the core of what craft beer is all about. And not only because a lot of brewers start there, but not only do they start there, this is where they start playing and tinkering and trying new things. But first you have to have that spark, that little bit of magic where you make that beer and it tastes really good, and then you really gets your juices going. And I, even though I've had that before, I got it again last night from this plastic barrel that's in my refrigerator that basically took 20 minutes of my time over 2 weeks to make. So I think that's really exciting. And I think that there is something there that if we lose that core, that heart and soul, then we're kind of hollowing out what craft beer is about at a time when even the outer part of that industry is having a hard time. So anyway, I think there's a lot here to be excited about. So
thanks, Joe.
Is there anything else you guys would want to add? Anything else we didn't cover that you think we ought to get in here?
I just wanted to kind of maybe just give a scope of how many people are using this right now. We again started from zero in early, really mid 2024 is when we launched in the U.S. market. Got some pretty great milestones that we've achieved recently. So as a company, we just sold our 300,000th Pinter machine.
Nice.
Which is kind of wild. So there's a lot of people out there using it. We sell about a little over 15,000 of these a month. And like I said, most of those consumers are on subscription, and we're doing something around 60 to 70,000 individual beers a month.
That's awesome.
And we're, it's 12 pints at a time, just like millions of pints that are being sold. Equivalent, so there's a lot of production people that probably listen to this. So, you put that in U.S. barrels, we'll do something close. This is insane, but we'll do close to 30,000 barrels of beer brewed at people's homes this year, 1.5 gallons at a time, which I'm very proud of. I just think it's pretty remarkable. It would make us a pretty big craft brewer right now.
Yeah, you'd be in the
just right
certainly
now.
Upper percentile of craft brewer by size with that,
for sure. And if there was a fastest growing craft beer list that we were allowed to be on, we would probably be at the top. It's like thousands of % growth in the U.S. And to me, it's just, again, being in home brewing to start my career, seeing a fast growing craft brand in the peak of craft, and then to see where we are 10 years later, I'm incredibly excited to see that like there's still people who want to drink beer in the United States.
Well,
no matter what you want to read, like
for sure,
there's still a lot of people that love beer.
I'm curious about would you all go beyond the U.S. and UK? Like we have listeners around the world too, brewers around the world who tune in. Is this something you could see expanding to other countries eventually?
Absolutely. So we want to be and we already are an international brand, but there are plenty of markets that this format makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of white space in the United States, if I'm honest. I mean, it's just such a beer crazy market. But absolutely, there are other markets in the world, and you can imagine which ones they are, that would make a ton of sense for us to enter. And we see a world where there's a million people using Pinter in the next 5 years. And I don't see that as like a crazy thing. And then, Will can talk to maybe some of the styles real quick, just the range, so people see that it's more than just, an IPA and a lager that we offer. And
so of course we do the collabs with all of these big breweries from the UK, US. We also have our kind of own brand beers as well. So these would be different styles of pale ales, bitter ales, stouts, lagers. We've got a seltzer, we've got a raspberry sour. We have a really, really wide selection. Also, some Belgian beers as well. Ciders also. So we've really got something for everyone, every taste, every palate, every need.
Well, that's probably a good place to wind this down. Guys, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure testing it out and drinking this beer I've got right here with me. If people want to find you, Pinter.com. Anything else they should know?
This could not be easier. Pinter.com. You see the different, colors that we offer for Pinters, the different subscription programs that we have. You can also just buy a Pinter and just buy a beer whenever you want. You can do that as well.
And Paul, if there are breweries out there who want to reach out and get involved with this and partner with you guys and maybe have a Pinter beer fresh press in their beer made, how do they get in touch with you guys?
That would be great. And I work with the partners myself personally. The best way would be partnerships@pinter.com. That goes directly to me, and I'd love to chat with them about the opportunity.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. Thank you again. Pinter, check it out. I'm definitely going to be brewing some more beer with it. Jamie will be back with you later this week with episode 493. We are inching ever closer to episode 500. All right, guys, this has been a delight to talk to you. Super interesting. And I'm looking forward to making more beer with this Pinter and drinking it. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.